Many large and lethal reptiles have existed on our planet, from ferocious crocodilians to giant theropod dinosaurs. Compared to these toothy monsters, turtles don T have nearly the same deadly reputation. Around the world today, these gentle, slow-moving reptiles are beloved and protected by many, with several species even kept as household pets. It's hard to imagine turtles being so dangerous, but there was a time in Earth's past when giant carnivorous turtles would have sent chills down your spine. These terrifying turtles lived long ago during the late Cretaceous period, roughly between 80 and 74 million years ago. The late Cretaceous is best known for its gigantic dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus rex. But just a few million years before the T-Rex ruled the land, sea turtles were also undergoing their own trend of gigantism. Several prehistoric sea turtle species grew to enormous sizes, and the largest of them all was Archelon iscaros, a leathery-shelled monster that dwarfed any turtle species ever discovered. At its biggest, Archelon measured about 4.6 meters, 15 feet, from head to tail, and around 4 meters, 13 feet, from one flipper tip to the other. It likely weighed up to 3 metric tons more than even the heaviest great white shark ever recorded. This was essentially a sea turtle as long as a car and as heavy as a rhinoceros. Despite its massive build, Archelon's body was surprisingly streamlined and hydrodynamic. This was largely due to the unusual structure of its upper shell, or carapace. Most modern turtle shells are rigid, bony domes covered by tough scales, called scutes. Land-dwelling turtles usually have high domed shells into which they can retreat for protection, while sea turtles tend to have flatter, more hydrodynamic shells. Archelon, however, didn't have a typical heavily armored shell at all. While it did have some bony framework, the shell's bones were relatively thin and were overlain by a soft, leathery skin, much like the shell of a modern leatherback sea turtle. This flexible, leathery carapace gave Archelon a more streamlined body plan, making it buoyant and reducing drag in the water. Archelon probably wasn't breaking any speed records, but it could propel itself through the water with surprising efficiency for its size. In the warm Cretaceous seas, one can picture this colossal turtle gliding leisurely in the shallows, its wide flippers moving in slow, powerful strokes as sunlight filters down through clear blue water onto its broad back. Rather than quickness, what made Archelon a fearsome predator in its time was its powerful, crushing beak. Archelon's skull was very long, nearly a meter, 3 feet in length, and its beaked jaws were strong enough to smash through bone and tough armor alike. This formidable beak allowed Archelon to bite through the hard shells of armored prey. For example, paleontologists suspect that Archelon may have fed on creatures like baculites, an unusual, straight-shelled relative of ammonites. Not all baculites were large, some were only 7 centimeters, 3 inches, long, but the biggest species could reach up to 2 meters, over 6 feet, in length from the tips of their tentacles to the ends of their elongated shells. Like other ammonite cephalopods, the inside of a baculite's shell was divided into chambers by walls called septa. These septa made the shell stronger and more resistant to pressure or predation. But Archelon was no ordinary predator. With its enormous, hard beak, it could have cracked even these reinforced shells, exposing the soft animal within. We can imagine Archelon clamping down on a large baculite or giant clam, the shell splintering with a loud crunch in its jaws. Despite possessing such tremendous power, Archelon likely often chose easier meals when available, perhaps chasing slower, soft-bodied creatures like jellyfish and squid that it could gulp down without a fight. As a giant predator at the top of its food chain, Archelon became a dominant force in one of the most vibrant marine ecosystems of the prehistoric world. During the late Cretaceous, much of central North America was submerged under a warm, shallow sea known as the Western Interior Seaway. This majestic inland sea stretched from the Arctic Ocean in the north down to the Gulf of Mexico in the south, splitting the continent into two land masses. It formed because tectonic activity, the subduction of an oceanic plate beneath the western edge of North America, caused the land to sag, creating a broad, low basin. With global sea levels very high at the time, ocean waters soon flooded in to fill that basin. The result was a shallow tropical sea that, at its widest, spanned over 1,000 kilometers from east to west. In many areas it was not particularly deep. Sunlight could penetrate far below the surface, warming the water and nourishing rich plant and plankton growth. Soon, the warm, nutrient-rich waters of the seaway teemed with marine life. Primitive reef-building organisms, such as colonies of rudist clams, constructed massive reef mounds on the seafloor in the southern parts of the seaway. These reefs and hard grounds, in turn, provided shelter and food for all manner of creatures: fish, crustaceans, mollusks, and marine reptiles. Even in the northern stretches of the seaway, where reef builders were smaller, there were still abundant oysters, bryozoans, and sponges carpeting the shallows. It was a rich, thriving marine habitat, a perfect hunting ground for a giant like Archelon. Using its tough beak, Archelon may have rummaged along the seafloor and through reef structures, looking for anything edible. It could dig into soft sediment or pry apart clusters of shellfish, stirring up clouds of sand as it searched for buried clams or snails to crush. Of course, Archelon wasn't the only predator enjoying the bounty of the Western Interior Seaway. Those waters were home to an incredible variety of hunters, foragers, and scavengers, all interacting in a complex food web. Some of Archelon's direct competitors would have been large predatory fish, long-necked plesiosaurs, and even an unusual diving seabird called Hesperornis. During the late Cretaceous, Hesperornis was a common predator in the seaway's shallow waters. This bird had lost the ability to fly, but it was excellently adapted to life in the water. It had powerful hind legs and a sleek body, propelling itself like a living torpedo as it chased fish underwater. Hesperornis even had sharp teeth, a rarity for birds. Its teeth weren't in separate sockets like those of most animals. Instead, they lined grooves that ran along its jaw. The teeth were pointed and angled backward, perfect for snaring slippery prey such as wriggling fish. Though Hesperornis mostly caught fish, it might have occasionally gone after small squid or other soft prey. Hesperornis and Archelon likely shared the same hunting grounds, sometimes pursuing similar food. Perhaps a Hesperornis would dart through a school of fish, snapping up a meal, while nearby the immense Archelon cruised slowly, scanning for larger prey on the seafloor. However, these agile seabirds were the least of Archelon's worries. Far more dangerous creatures lurked in the seaway alongside the giant turtle. Archelon, due to its sheer size and its thick, leathery shell, would have been a challenging target for most mid-sized predators. A hungry shark might nip at a juvenile Archelon or scavenge an injured one, but few smaller carnivores could seriously threaten a healthy adult. Yet, in the depths of the western interior, seaway swam truly enormous carnivores that even an Archelon had to fear. Chief among these were the mosasaurs, giant marine reptiles that were the apex predators of those waters. One particularly formidable mosasaur was Tylosaurus, likely the largest hunter in that ecosystem. Tylosaurus grew to about 15 meters, 50 feet, long, with a long muscular body and a powerful tail built for speed. In many ways, Tylosaurus was like a scaled-up monitor lizard adapted for the ocean. It had flippers for limbs, a long snout filled with sharp teeth, and an insatiable appetite. Paleontologists have found fossilized stomach contents of Tylosaurus individuals, and the menu was fearsome. Other mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, large fish, diving birds like Hesperornis, and even giant turtles. In fact, there is fossil evidence that Tylosaurus dined on the second largest sea turtle of all time, Protostega. Protostega was a massive Cretaceous sea turtle, slightly smaller than Archelon, reaching maybe 3 to 4 meters in length. The remains of Protostega found in a mosasaur's stomach tell us that large turtles were indeed on the menu for these marine reptiles. It is not known for sure if Tylosaurus ever attacked a full-grown Archelon, but it is certainly possible that our giant turtle had to keep a wary eye on any mosasaur gliding in the distance. Apart from the mosasaurs, the seaway also hosted many sharks such as Squalicorax, sometimes nicknamed the crow shark. Squalicorax wasn't as gigantic as a mosasaur, but it was still a respectable predator, growing several meters long, and likely an opportunistic feeder. It had serrated, curved teeth well suited for slicing flesh, reminiscent of a modern tiger shark's teeth. Squalicorax probably hunted smaller fish and marine reptiles, and scavenged on carcasses it found. Fossil evidence shows Squalicorax teeth embedded in the bones of animals like the flying reptile pteranodon. It's intriguing to imagine a shark like Squalicorax might have occasionally lunged out of the water to snatch a low-flying pterosaur, or more likely, scavenge their bodies after they crashed into the sea. This hints that almost nothing that died or fell into the water went to waste in this ecosystem. Even Archelon itself could have benefited from carcasses. Perhaps it sometimes scavenged on dead animals, using its big jaws to tear off chunks of meat. And conversely, if an Archelon ever died, its huge body would attract a frenzy of Squalicorax sharks, smaller mosasaurs, and other scavengers to strip the carcass. Archelon's world was full of life, from tiny shellfish clinging to its own shell to apex predators patrolling the depths. It is quite likely that Archelon's massive back hosted colonies of barnacles or other small hitchhikers, much like modern whales and sea turtles often do. A giant, slow-moving creature offers an ideal home for such organisms. Barnacles attaching to Archelon's flippers or carapace would be carried to nutrient-rich feeding grounds as the turtle wandered, benefiting the barnacles while probably not harming the turtle. In moderation, these passengers would only be minor inconveniences, although if too many encrusted its shell, they might have caused some drag or irritation. Still, floating barnacle colonies on a turtle's back would just be another normal sight in the teeming late Cretaceous seas. For millions of years, Archelon thrived in the western interior seaway, amidst a beautiful array of Cretaceous marine life. But unfortunately, Archelon itself would not last beyond the late Cretaceous. Its decline began even before the mass extinction that marks the end of that era. The great seaway that had nurtured Archelon began to shrink as sea levels gradually fell and the continents shifted. Over time, that vast inland sea split into smaller, more isolated bodies of water. This habitat fragmentation would have made life harder for Archelon. Fewer hunting grounds, more competition with other predators squeezed into the remaining coastal seas. Adult Archelon probably had little to fear in the water due to their size, but like modern sea turtles, they would have laid their eggs on beaches, and those eggs and newly hatched baby turtles were defenseless. We can imagine a female Archelon hauling her tremendous bulk onto a sandy shore under cover of darkness, digging a nest for her eggs. The nest might be discovered by prowling dinosaurs, perhaps small feathered predators like troodontids, or other scavengers that would happily consume the soft eggs or tiny hatchlings. Additionally, towards the very end of the Cretaceous, the global climate was shifting. Temperatures were cooling from their mid-Cretaceous highs, and conditions began to favor animals with faster metabolisms or better internal temperature control. Giant cold-blooded reptiles like Archelon may have struggled as the environment changed. By around 74 million years ago, Archelon finally went extinct. This was still about 9 million years before the cataclysmic asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs at 66 million years ago. So Archelon's disappearance was part of a more gradual ecological change. Luckily, not all turtles perished with Archelon. Many smaller turtle species did survive beyond the Cretaceous period, carrying the turtle lineage through that turbulent extinction and into the new world of the Cenozoic era. These survivors eventually diverged into the myriad turtle species we know and treasure today. Remarkable as modern turtles are, none of them grow anywhere near as large as Archelon did. Archelon remains the largest turtle known to have ever lived on Earth. But the story of giant turtles did not end with Archelon's demise. In the epochs that followed the dinosaurs, on different continents and in different habitats, evolution would, at times, produce other turtles of extraordinary size and even fearsome demeanor. Each arose in its own unique environment, and while none would quite match Archelon's colossal dimensions, these later giants were still formidable creatures in their own right. Let us travel forward in time to one of those new worlds, the Paleocene epoch, about 60 million years ago. The dinosaurs, apart from the birds, are gone, having been wiped out in the Great Extinction 6 million years earlier. In their absence, Earth's ecosystems are rebounding with new life. Mammals are evolving and diversifying, but in some places reptiles still hold sway and have grown to impressive sizes. Picture a steamy swamp in what is now northern South America. The air is hot and heavy with moisture. Lush green ferns and towering tropical trees crowd the water's edge. It's a swampy rainforest world, something like a much warmer version of today's Amazon or Orinoco Basin. The Paleocene climate is a greenhouse swelter, with no polar ice and sea levels high. In the murky water, tannin-stained and warm, we see floating mats of vegetation and tangled roots dipping down from dense jungles on the banks. Dragonflies and primitive birds flit above the canopy, and in the water lurk giant reptiles, unlike anything alive today. This is Cerrejón, a vast swampy region of tropical South America, 5 million years after the dinosaurs, the domain of titanic snakes, and, waiting just beneath the surface, an enormous turtle that patrols these prehistoric wetlands. Sliding silently under the duckweed and water lilies is Carbonamys coffrini, whose name means coal turtle, so named because its fossil was found in a coal mine. Carbonamys is an extinct giant side-necked turtle, and it is the undisputed giant of this swamp. Its shell alone measures about 1.7 meters, 5 feet 7 inches, long, about the size of a bathtub, or roughly as tall as a person standing upright. The shell is broad and oval, a mobile island riding low in the water. As the great turtle rises to the surface to breathe, the tip of its snout causes a gentle ripple. Its head is almost unbelievably large. The skull is 24 centimeters, nearly 10 inches, long, about the size of an American football. Jaws attached to that skull are massive and powerful, capable of delivering a brutal bite. In fact, Carbonamys' jaws are so robust that they suggest a diet that could include just about anything this turtle encountered. Paleontologists think Carbonamys was an omnivore with a very broad menu. It likely ate aquatic plants and fruits that fell into the water, but also clams, snails, and any animal small enough to catch. In these swampy waterways, there were smaller turtles to compete with, as well as fish and amphibians, and even crocodilians. Any smaller turtle or unlucky fish that wandered too close might suddenly find itself clamped in Carbonamys' crushing beak. Even young crocodiles could have been on the menu. We can imagine one of those Paleocene crocodilians sunning itself on a log in the shallows. It's perhaps a meter long, a predator in its own right, but still juvenile. Without a sound, a dark shape glides beneath it. In a flash of movement, Carbonamys lunges upward from the murk, its massive jaws open. The turtle's beak closes around the astonished crocodile with irresistible force. The armor of the reptile crunches, and the hapless croc is dragged under the water, disappearing in a burst of bubbles and mud. For any creature smaller than itself, Carbonamys truly is a terror of the swamp. In this Paleocene ecosystem, Carbonamys is not alone in being oversized. Paleontologists have discovered that this same environment hosted Titanoboa, the largest snake ever known, a 13-meter, 43-foot, boa constrictor-like serpent that could swallow crocodiles whole. There were also giant predatory fish and other hefty reptiles called dinosaurs lurking in the rivers. It seems that several lineages attained gigantic proportions in this period. Scientists theorize that a combination of factors, fewer top predators after the dinosaurs vanished, abundant food resources, expansive warm habitats, and perhaps a climate that favored large cold-blooded bodies allowed these giants to evolve. Carbonamys' smaller turtle relatives had lived alongside dinosaurs in preceding eras, but only now, in this predator-light Paleocene swamp, could a turtle reach such a monstrous size. The habitat itself was enormous. Imagine a vast swamp covering thousands of square kilometers, effectively a huge wetland ecosystem, where a giant turtle could roam widely and have little competition for its herbivorous and omnivorous diet. One big turtle could dominate a whole lake or swamp, much like a large snapping turtle today can dominate a pond. The side-neck turtle design of Carbonamys is a bit different from what many of us picture with turtles. Unlike most North American turtles, which bend their neck vertically to tuck their head straight back, side-neck turtles, found today in South America, Africa, and Australia, fold their heads sideways beneath the shell. Carbonamys, being a side-neck turtle, could not retract its massive head fully into its shell. but likely it didn't need to. Few creatures would dare to attack something so large and armored. Fossils from the Sarrajon Formation, where Carbonamys was found, include many turtle shells with bite marks from crocodile attacks. But none of those shells belong to an adult Carbonamys. It seems no crocodile around was big enough or bold enough to mess with a full-grown Carbonamys. In fact, it might have been the other way around. Smaller crocs probably had to watch out for the giant turtle. One paleontologist quipped that Carbonamys was like having one big snapping turtle living in the middle of a lake. It could eat anything it wanted and had essentially cleared out its territory of competitors. For perhaps a few million years, Carbonamys, and possibly other large turtles in its family, reigned in these hot swamps. We can imagine our giant turtle drifting through corridors of mangrove-like trees whose roots form shadowy tunnels in the water. In the steamy midday, it might crawl up onto a partially submerged log to bask, its huge dark shell emerging from the water as butterflies flit around and frogs croak in the shadows. Its head pokes out, surveying the primeval swamp with slow, ancient eyes. Aside from the occasional titan snake sliding by, or a big crocodile in the distance, Carbonamys has little to fear. The warm rain begins to patter on giant fern leaves, and the turtle slips back into the water, disappearing beneath a mat of floating foliage. It was a life of plentiful food and relative safety for this prehistoric giant. Yet, nothing lasts forever. As the Paleocene progressed and gave way to the Eocene epoch, climates and ecosystems continued to change. New types of mammals were becoming larger and more numerous, and the swampy habitat at Archelon began to shift. The giant snake Titanoboa died out as conditions changed, and so too did Carbonamys. Eventually, the coal swamps dried or transformed, and this giant coal turtle vanished, leaving behind only its fossils in layers of ancient swamp sediment. But in other parts of the world, in ages still to come, turtles would again achieve exceptional sizes in response to new environmental opportunities. Now let us jump ahead to the Miocene epoch around 10 million years ago and travel to a different part of the world, the northern regions of South America, once more. The time is much later now. Mammals have firmly taken hold on land, and the world's continents are closer to their modern positions. In South America, the climate is still warm and tropical, and the northern part of the continent is dominated by an immense wetland system unlike anything we see today. Imagine a landscape of sprawling wetlands, vast lakes, and winding rivers, a colossal mosaic of swamps, and slow-moving freshwater stretching across what is now the Amazon and Orinoco basins. At this point in time, the Andes Mountains to the west are still rising, and the great Amazon River has not yet found its path to the Atlantic. Instead, water collects in huge intermontane basins, forming something like a giant inland delta or series of megalakes. These Miocene wetlands are home to an astonishing array of life: enormous crocodilians, gigantic rodents, strange ungulates, and swarms of fishes and turtles thriving in the warm waters. In these waters lives the largest freshwater turtle that the world has ever known, Stupendemys geographicus. The name Stupendemys literally means stupendous turtle, and it's no exaggeration, this creature is truly gigantic. Fossils show that some Stupendemys shells were over 2.5 meters, 8 feet, long, and from head to tail, this animal may have reached about 4 meters, 13 feet. A full-grown Stupendemys likely weighed on the order of 1,200 kilograms, around 1.25 tons. That's roughly the weight of a small car all packed into the form of a turtle. Imagine a turtle as long as a sedan, with a broad flattened shell like a massive dining table, gliding through a marsh. Unlike Archelon and Stupendemys, which were primarily sea-dwelling and swamp-dwelling respectively, Stupendemys was a denizen of freshwater lakes and rivers. It belonged to the side-necked turtle family, like Stupendemys did, a lineage that was clearly successful in producing giants at multiple times in South America's history. The shell of Stupendemys was not only huge, but also had distinctive features. Male Stupendemys had sturdy horns or projections on the front edges of their carapace, near the neck. These horns jutted outward and would have given the front of the turtle a spiked, formidable appearance. We can picture an old male Stupendemys paddling slowly along the lake bottom at the front corners of its immense oval shell. Two blunt, horn-like protrusions stick forward, perhaps covered in a sheath of tough keratin. These might remind one of the tines of a battering ram or the prongs of a fork. What were they for? Paleontologists suspect these horns were used in combat between rival males. Deep scars found on some fossil shells suggest that male Stupendemys would ram or stab each other with their shell horns, likely fighting over mates or territory. It seems even gentle reptiles can have a violent competitive side during breeding season. We can imagine two of these titans meeting in a shallow inlet of the lake. Both are enormous. Ancient turtles, each perhaps a century old, their wide shells encrusted with algae and small clams. They regard each other warily. Slowly, they draw closer, and then with a sudden thrust of their strong limbs, they collide. A dull thud resonates through the water as horn meets shell. Each male pushes, hind limbs digging into the mud, necks extended and biting at the air. They strain in slow motion, trying to tilt or intimidate the other. Eventually, one turtle, perhaps older or slightly smaller, yields and backs away, retreating with a swirl of silt. The victor, with scratches on his shell as a badge of honor, moves on, ensuring his claim over that stretch of water. All of this happens in near silence underwater, a primeval contest that barely disturbs the calm surface above. When not grappling with each other, Stupendemys led a life of quiet abundance in its wetland home. Its diet appears to have been very broad. A recent analysis of a fossil skull suggests that Stupendemys was a generalist feeder, meaning it ate a variety of foods, both animal and plant. With jaws capable of shearing and crushing, it likely ate tough aquatic vegetation, fruits, and seeds that dropped from overhanging rainforest trees, and also small animals. Perhaps it would browse on floating water plants or fallen palm nuts in the shallows. But if an opportunity presented, Stupendemys could also snatch up fish or even small vertebrates. It's possible that little crocodilians hatchling or juvenile caimans occasionally fell prey to the big turtle if they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. One can imagine a group of baby caimans resting in the shade of lily pads. The water around them starts to move in a subtle whirl as the massive turtle hidden in the murk opens its mouth. Suddenly, with a quick sideways sweep of its neck, the turtle gulps one of the baby crocs whole, like a largemouth bass inhaling a minnow. Fossil evidence supports this omnivorous behavior. Bite marks and gut content clues indicate Stupendemys might have eaten fish, smaller reptiles like caimans and snakes, mollusks such as clams, and also plenty of plant material like aquatic weeds and fruit. In essence, Stupendemys ate just about anything it could catch or find, making the most of the bounty in those Miocene wetlands. Such a large turtle would have had few natural enemies, but the Miocene wetlands did harbor one predator capable of challenging it: Purosaurus, the giant caiman. Purosaurus was a colossal relative of alligators and caimans that could exceed 10 meters, 33 feet, in length, essentially a crocodilian as large as the biggest marine reptiles of the dinosaur age. A full-grown Purosaurus was probably the only creature in South America at the time that might view an adult Stupendemys as potential prey. If a Purosaurus managed to ambush a Stupendemys, a titanic struggle would ensue, the crocodilian S powerful jaws trying to clamp down on the turtle S shell, while the turtle S sheer bulk and perhaps those front horns might fend off the attacker. We have tantalizing clues that such clashes did occur. Some fossil shells of Stupendemys bear long, gouging bite marks that match the teeth spacing of enormous caimans, indicating that a Purosaurus likely bit into a Stupendemys S shell at some point. Whether the turtle survived that attack or ended up as a meal is unknown, but at least in some cases it appears these turtles lived with scars from attempted predation. Most likely, though, a healthy adult Stupendemys was a tough prize even for a giant caiman. The turtle S shell was like a fortress, very thick at the edges, and its immense size meant it couldn't be easily overpowered or swallowed. It is possible that Purosaurus, like modern crocodiles, might have preferred to target the younger turtles or simply coexist, focusing on softer prey like fish and large mammals that came to drink. For millions of years, the wetlands of northern South America provided a haven for Stupendemys. We can close our eyes and envision a tranquil Miocene lake at dawn. Mist clings to the warm water as surface. Distant howls or calls of strange prehistoric mammals echo from the forests. In the shallows, a head the size of a football breaks the surface a Stupendemys, coming up for a breath of morning air. It takes a slow gulp of the humid air, water pouring off its rough head, and then submerges again with barely a ripple, its great form passing over a sunken log encrusted with freshwater sponges. A school of fish scatters as the giant turtle S shadow passes over them. Nearby, along a reedy bank, another Stupendemys, perhaps a female, digs a nest in the mud, laying eggs the size of tennis balls, continuing the cycle of life. This giant turtle likely lived a long, steady life, possibly many decades or even over a century old, if it was anything like modern large tortoises. And like those tortoises, it probably had a slow metabolism and could go long periods just grazing and resting. One imagines that on a sunny afternoon, a Stupendemys might haul itself onto a sandbank, its huge weight causing it to sink a bit into the soft sand and bask in the sunlight to warm its blood. With eyes half closed and its immense shell fully exposed, it would appear as a dark, hulking oval from a distance, perhaps even mistaken for a small island by birds. It must have been a scene of primeval peace and grandeur. However, the reign of Stupendemys eventually came to an end. By about 5 to 7 million years ago, the late Miocene into the Pliocene, the world was changing yet again. The Andes continued to rise, altering weather patterns and causing the once connected wetlands to drain and reorganize. Rivers like the modern Amazon were beginning to take shape, flowing eastward to the Atlantic and draining the vast lakes. The colossal wetland habitat gradually disappeared, replaced by flowing rivers and seasonally flooded forests. This environmental upheaval, combined with competition from new predators, or simply the geological loss of its favorite habitat, spelled doom for the giant freshwater turtle. Stupendemys geographicus faded into extinction, leaving behind only its enormous shells and bones, buried in what are now desert outcrops of Venezuela and Colombia. It remains, as of our knowledge today, the largest freshwater turtle to ever live, and second in size only to Archelon among all turtles. Up to this point, our journey with giant turtles has taken us through seas and swamps, marine Archelon, swamp-dwelling Carbonamys, and river-lake titan Stupendemys. But turtles also colonize the land, and in one case, they reach gigantic sizes on terra firma as well. In the wake of the Miocene and Pliocene, by around 5 to 3 million years ago, truly enormous tortoises roamed parts of Asia. Now we shift our focus to the woodlands and grasslands of the late Miocene and Pliocene in what is now the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia. Here, among ancient elephants, rhinos, and saber-toothed cats, lived a tortoise so large that it defies the imagination, the biggest land turtle that ever lived, sometimes known as Megalocalyce atlas, formerly Colossocalyce. Megalocalyce lived from roughly the late Miocene through the mid-Pleistocene, about 7 million to maybe 1 million years ago. It was truly a colossal tortoise. Its shell, carapace, alone exceeded 2 meters, 6.5 feet in length, and its total body length from head to tail could reach about 2.7 meters, 9 feet. Estimates of its weight have varied widely. Older, less accurate estimates guessed it might have weighed up to 3 or 4 tons, comparable to an elephant. But more recent and careful studies suggest a weight closer to 1,000 kilograms, about 1 ton, still extremely impressive. Even at 1 ton, that is equivalent to the weight of a small car or about 2 grand pianos. Picture a tortoise the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, with a shell taller than a human being's waist. This was Megalocalyce. The environment of Megalocalyce would have been subtropical to tropical forest and open woodland. Fossils have been found across what are now India, Pakistan, and as far east as Indonesia, Sulawesi, and Timor, possibly representing related species. So we can imagine, for example, the forest edge of a Pliocene era river valley in northern India. The morning sun breaks through broad-leaved tropical trees. In a grassy clearing, we see what at first looks like a gray boulder, or perhaps a rounded hut. But then it moves slowly, steadily. It's a gigantic tortoise, lumbering through the underbrush, munching on vegetation as it goes. Megalocalyce atlas likely had a domed shell that was highly expanded but also relatively thin-walled for its size, to reduce weight. The front of its lower shell, the plastron, had a thick, protruding forked extension, a feature seen in some large tortoises today and used for combat between males. Its legs were columnar and robust, like the pillars of a small building, holding up its massive body. The tortoise's head, while proportionally not as gigantic as Carbonamys S or Archelon S, was still large, skull over 30 centimeters long, with strong jaws for grinding plant matter. It had a broad, blunt snout and probably a ridged beak suitable for shearing through tough vegetation. Megalocalyce was an herbivore, feeding on a variety of plant materials. It could browse on grasses, shrubs, and low-hanging branches. With its immense height, when standing tall on all fours, its shell could reach about 1.8 meters, 6 feet, off the ground. It may have been able to stretch its neck up to nibble foliage nearly 3 meters high. One can envision a megalocheilus in a grove of ancient fig trees, reaching its long neck to snap off branches full of leaves or fruit. It might also have eaten fallen fruit from the forest floor, and possibly did some rooting in the soil for fungi or minerals, as modern tortoises sometimes do. Because of its great size, this tortoise probably didn't need to hide from predators by pulling into its shell. Few predators would even attempt to attack it. Indeed, a fully grown megalocheilus was likely immune to predation. Perhaps only a pack of large, determined carnivores could have harassed it, but in the Pliocene of Asia, such predators, like big cats or giant hyenas, would have found a better target in swifter herbivores. The tortoise's best defense was its sheer bulk and the thickness of its shell over its vital parts. Males of megalocheilus might have engaged in dominance battles, much as modern giant tortoises on the Galapagos or Aldabra Islands will shove and attempt to flip each other to establish breeding rights. These ancient tortoises probably did the same, but on a grander scale. If two large megalocheilus males met, they might circle each other slowly, hissing and stretching their necks out to appear taller. Tortoises often do this to size each other up. They could then use the forked projection on their plastron to ram into the other's shell, trying to overturn their opponent. Given their weight, it would have been a slow-motion wrestling match of enormous strength, likely without serious injury thanks to their armor. But the larger or stronger male would eventually tip the other or force it to retreat. The ground would tremble under their combined 2-ton weight as they pushed. Imagine standing nearby during such an encounter. You would hear a low grating sound of shell on shell, heavy thuds, and perhaps deep grunt-like hisses from the tortoises, echoing in the humid air of a prehistoric jungle. For most of the day, though, megalocheilus probably led a peaceful, sedate life. In the cooler morning and late afternoon hours, it would forage, and during the heat of midday, it might rest in the shade, conserving energy. Like modern tortoises, it wouldn't need to eat constantly. A creature that large can afford to have a slow metabolism. It might have lived many decades, perhaps a century or more, growing slowly but steadily to its gigantic proportions. An adult megalocheilus would essentially have had no predators, but juveniles, small tortoises perhaps a few tens of centimeters long, would have been vulnerable to big cats, crocodiles, or large constrictor snakes. Very few juvenile megalocheilus fossils are found, suggesting maybe their survival rate was low, but those that did reach full size enjoyed relative invulnerability. Megalocheilus persisted for a very long time into the early Quaternary period. It's sobering to think that early humans or their hominin relatives might have overlapped with the last of these gigantic tortoises. If some megalocheilus survived until around 1 million years ago, or slightly less, creatures like Homo erectus could have encountered them in South Asia. To a human, a living megalocheilus would have been an awe-inspiring sight, a living tank trundling through the brush. There is no direct evidence, as of now, of human interaction with megalocheilus. But given how humans have historically viewed large tortoises as sources of meat, one can imagine that if they met, early people might have hunted them. However, climate changes were likely a more fundamental factor in this tortoise's decline. As the Pleistocene epoch arrived, climates around the world became cooler and drier, with more pronounced ice age cycles. The lush tropical and subtropical habitats in which megalocheilus thrived may have shrunk or fragmented. Giant tortoises, needing stable warm environments and long times to mature, would have struggled with the rapid climate oscillations. By the middle of the Pleistocene, Megalocheles atlas and its close kin were gone. Today, the largest tortoises like the Galapagos giant tortoise reach up to 250 kilos, about 550 lbs, a far cry from an animal that weighed 4 times that much. The age of the gigantic land turtle ended, leaving only its massive fossils as evidence that such a creature once walked the earth. Our journey through turtle prehistory has one more curious stop. While Megalocheles was the biggest tortoise, another prehistoric turtle was perhaps the most visually startling. In the twilight of the age of megafauna, as the Pleistocene drew to a close, a mere 100,000 to 50,000 years ago, there lived in Australia and on some Pacific islands a large turtle that looked like something out of a fantasy. Meolania, the horned turtle. Meolania wasn't as enormous as the giants we've discussed earlier, but it was still impressive in size and made up for any lack of extreme bulk with bizarre armor. The largest species of Meolania had a carapace approaching 2 meters in length, and from head to tail tip it measured about 2.5 meters, 8-9 feet. It likely weighed around 200-300 kilos, 400-600 lbs or more, akin to a big Galapagos tortoise in mass. But unlike any tortoise today, Meolania had a skull adorned with long, curved horns and a tail ringed with spiky, armored knobs. In fact, if you saw one, you might not even recognize it as a turtle. At first glance, it might bring to mind a small ankylosaur dinosaur or some mythical dragon. Meolania lived primarily on land, or possibly some species were semi-aquatic, and fossils have been found in Queensland, Australia, and on Lord Howe Island, New Caledonia, and other Pacific islands. Let us envision a setting. Pleistocene Australia, perhaps on the fringe of a rainforest or an open woodland near a billabong, watering hole. The climate is slightly cooler and drier than before, but still warm temperate. Amidst cycads and eucalyptus-like trees, a bulky, low-slung figure moves among the ferns. It is about 2 meters long, with a wide, flattish shell covered in mud and old foliage. Its head is large and decorated with 2 prominent horns that jut outward from the back of the skull. Over its neck, each horn may be a handspan long. Smaller bumps and spikes cover the top of its head and snout, giving it a fierce visage. Because of these horns, Meolania cannot pull its head directly back into its shell. The horns would get in the way, but that doesn't matter, because the head itself is like a spiked club. The tail of Meolania is long for a turtle and ends in a sort of rugged, bony knob, with rings of spines along its length. This tail looks quite like the tail of a glyptodont, an extinct armored mammal, or even a morningstar mace. The turtle's limbs are sturdy, with claws for walking on land. Its overall appearance is that of an armored tank, extremely well defended at every angle. This peculiar turtle, Meolania, likely fed on plants, making it another herbivore, or perhaps an omnivore with a diet including fruits, plants, and maybe carrion or invertebrates occasionally. It might have grazed low vegetation, chewed tough plant fibers, or even gnawed fungus off logs. Some scientists speculate, given that it lived on islands as well, that it could have eaten fallen coconut-like fruits or shelled vegetation that required a strong bite. With its protective headgear and tail, Meolania probably felt safe rummaging in the open. If a predator approached, say, a hungry quincun, a giant monitor lizard akin to the Komodo dragon, or a marsupial lion sniffing around the horned turtle would stand its ground. The turtle could tuck its head somewhat, sideways under the rim of its shell, presenting the sharp horn tips to any attacker. The tail could be swung side to side, its spikes deterring approach from behind. Any would-be predator trying to bite the head or tail of this turtle would get a mouthful of spikes for its effort. It is easy to imagine a large monitor lizard stalking a Meiolenea, only to be slapped in the snout by a swift swing of the turtle's spiky tail. After a few painful jabs, the frustrated predator would likely give up and seek an easier meal elsewhere. In this way, Meiolenea's unusual armor made it very well adapted to life alongside formidable Pleistocene hunters. Meiolenea survived for a remarkably long time, enduring up until nearly the end of the Pleistocene. On some small islands in the South Pacific, like New Caledonia and Vanuatu, a species of horned turtle closely related to Meiolenea appears to have lived until just a few thousand years ago, practically yesterday in geologic terms. In fact, evidence shows that the first human settlers of those islands encountered these turtles and likely hunted them. Piles of bones, mostly leg bones, have been found in ancient refuse pits, suggesting that early human hunters butchered the turtles on sight, probably because the shells and bodies were too large to drag back to camp whole, and carried the choice bits home. It seems that within a few hundred years of human arrival, the horned turtles on those islands were eaten to extinction. This poignant discovery shows that Meiolenea was among the last of the megafaunal turtles, persisting until humans themselves became a factor in the ecosystem. On mainland Australia, the horned turtles might have disappeared earlier, possibly due to climate shifts as the continent became more arid toward the last glacial maximum. But it's amazing to think that if we go back in time a mere 3,000 years, there may have still been an island where giant spiky-headed turtles roamed under the tropical sun, oblivious to the fact that they were about to become part of human history. Now, in our present day, the giant turtles of prehistory are gone. The largest living turtle today is the leatherback sea turtle, which can reach over 2 meters in length and weigh nearly 900 kilos, about 2,000 lbs. A true giant by modern standards, yet still only a quarter the mass of Archelon and much shorter. The biggest freshwater turtle alive, the Asian softshell Pelocheles, or perhaps the alligator snapping turtle in the Americas, depending on how one measures, is minuscule next to Stupendemys. And the giant tortoises of the Galapagos and Aldabra, while impressive, would look like little siblings beside Megaloculus atlas. The world that once allowed turtles to grow as big as cars and to dominate their environments is very different from the world now. Continents have moved, climates have cooled and dried, and new types of animals, including humans, now exert pressure on ecosystems in ways that likely prevent such giants from easily evolving or surviving. Yet, as we conclude this journey, it is wonderful to realize that the turtle lineage endures. Those humble box turtles in your garden, the red-eared sliders basking on a log, or the sea turtles paddling in our oceans, they all carry in their DNA the legacy of those titanic ancestors. In their shells and reptilian features, we can glimpse an echo of Archelon's might, Carbonemys' power, Stupendemys' bulk, Megaloculus' grandeur, and Meiolenea's armor. Turtles are ancient survivors. They have seen dinosaurs come and go. They have conquered seas, swamps, rivers, and lands. They have grown into giants and then downsized again, adapting to whatever the earth has thrown at them. As you close your eyes, you might imagine what it was like back then. The gentle lapping of Cretaceous waves against a sandy shore as a gigantic Archelon turtle pulls itself onto the beach to nest. The chorus of frogs and insects in a Paleocene night as a massive Stupendemys slides through dark waters under the moonlight. The mirror-still surface of a Miocene lake, broken by the ridged back of a surfacing Stupendemys taking a breath. The quiet rustle of Pliocene forest leaves as an enormous Megalocalyst tortoise slowly pushes its way through foliage, or the soft thud of a horned Myolania-S footsteps on the loamy soil of an island forest, tail dragging behind, leaving a trail of bent ferns. These are peaceful scenes now, safely tucked away in the deep past. The giant turtles of ages long gone can terrify our imaginations, but also inspire awe and wonder. In the end, we are left with a sense of the remarkable diversity life has shown through time. From terrifying titans to tranquil grazers, the turtles used to be terrifying indeed, and magnificent, and strange, and so very different from the familiar turtles we know today. The world was once a place where turtles the size of cars swam and strolled, where their shells were like castles, and their bites could crush bone. Though those days are far behind us, we can still marvel at them through the fossil record. In the darkness of night now, we might drift into dreams where we swim alongside Archelon in a warm inland sea, or watch a giant tortoise nibble leaves in an emerald forest. These ancient turtles remind us that even the most unassuming creatures can have incredible chapters in their history. With their slow, deliberate ways and enduring presence, turtles carry a kind of ancient peace. And knowing the grand story of their past only makes that peace feel deeper. In our mind's eye, the gigantic silhouettes of Archelon, Stupendemys, Stupendemys, Megalocalyst, and Myolania fade back into the mists of time. We return to the present, where a little turtle might be quietly plodding along a riverbank or bobbing in a pond under the starlight. The once terrifying giants are gone, but their legacy lives on in every turtle that still wanders, ever so gently, through the world. Sweet dreams of ancient seas and giant shells. The turtles of today carry the whispers of those fearsome, magnificent ancestors, reminders of a time when turtles, indeed, used to be terrifying, and our world was all the more wondrous for it.